Hey y'all, it's your co-host Yogi Rich, introducing episode 8 of One Answer Yoga. What is pain's purpose? Radha and I picked this topic because several days before we recorded, we both coincidentally got injured in kind of a significant way. Honestly, I'm still recovering from it myself. Uh, with that being front and center on our minds, Radha felt like it was really a good time for us to talk about pain. Yoga offers so many different points of views and tips and tools on how to help deal with pain, the role of suffering in our lives, and how that physical pain isn't always just directly correlated with the muscles and the bones involved, but it could be related to our emotional state and the belief systems that we hold. So, without any further ado, please enjoy episode 8 of One Answer Yoga. One love and peace.
Okay, here we are. We're back. We decided to just jump in and record and not do like a little pre-chat today because uh, Quentin and I both went through something rather interesting. About a week ago, I went to the chiropractor after not having gone for a really long time and had an adjustment done. And then, like 2 days later, moved a bunch of furniture. And I said, I've had like my first like old person injury.
Mm,
As in, wow, hello, post 50, how my body did not bounce back in the ways that it has before, which was
mm.
so humbling and interesting. So I've kind of been laid out for about a week. Um, and even today, I was just telling Quinn, I said, we better just go hit record because I have no idea how long I'm going to be able to sit. And then, interestingly enough, just as I'm recovering, then Quentin, you can tell him what you were up
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, so I had the bright idea to play football. There was this it was called Vibes in the Park. It was like people of color, but it was mainly black folk at the Sunken Garden in Denver. Huge park, and there was just like 10 guys. We're all just sitting there throwing the ball together, and I was like, I know we're all old, but like let's play some football. Like why not? Let's play some 3-on-3 or something like that. So we did, and yeah, the first catch I made was a touchdown. I made it look sexy, but I like landed hard on my side and crunched like, ooh, even doing that, I like crunched right underneath my armpit, like these ribs here, like the muscles, and I don't know, and there's like been clicking. So I was able to play the rest of the game. I had great stats, but as soon as I like got home, I could barely sleep, and there was agony, and so it's like one of those injuries where every inhale hurts, like over like a certain like it hurts, and then every heavy heartbeat, like walking up these stairs to get to my spot, like just my heart beating, throbbing makes my chest hurt. So yeah, I was like, I can't really talk that much. I can't get too excited because then I'll just be like, wincing the whole podcast. Yeah.
Which I think is interesting because obviously, I mean, we have a pain epidemic in our country, right? Like that's what's led to the drug epidemic that we're just struggling with now of trying to get a handle on. And so I kind of felt like, as I was laying there so laid up in pain,
Hmm.
and really appreciating like what our working class is going through. And it particularly, um, while it does affect women, and certainly it does happen a huge number of the people who are in chronic pain, particularly back pain, are working class men. And the injuries that they've sustained by doing the kind of work that really sustains our society.
Mm,
And so I kind of thought that might be an interesting thing to discuss today a little bit was pain, because first of all, I felt very grateful that I have a lot of alternative resources at my disposal.
mm.
Like I was raised in a way to use really holistic alternative methods and not immediately just to reach for pain medication. I had this whole slew of tools in my toolbox. That being said, there was a lot of Tylenol and Advil that happened this week just to even get me like off the bed.
Mm.
So having that experience of like, wow, it can really lay you out. And then I'm fortunate that I did not have to work this week. I was telling my chiropractor, I said, I have the luxury of trying to heal myself the slow, right way.
Mhm.
Most people do not. Most people just have to take a bunch of pain medication and get themselves back on track. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting, particularly because, my chiropractor sends me home with this list of, exercises to do. And of course, all the exercises are just yoga exercises. And so many people are brought to yoga through pain, right? Back pain, I think, is the number one reason why people get to yoga in the first place. It's because
100%.
people are like, my back hurts, and people are like, oh, you should do yoga. So
Oh
I
my
think it's
goodness.
kind of interesting that both of us went through these experiences this last week and kind of like sharing some of the insights. So, um,
I mean, I already have a couple things I want to say off of that. Like, you know,
yeah, yeah, jump
I'll
in because
just,
there's a
yeah.
lot I think we could suggest for people that could be really practical for
Oh
pain
my
this week.
goodness. 100%. Just to, I was a construction superintendent, so I oversaw job sites where, that was one of the main reasons why I got into yoga specifically. Like, my own body hurt, partially because of injuries from playing sports even when you're younger. And I would even start there. Like, a lot of the working class men attitude comes from us. Like, we grew up as boys, so like whatever the boy culture was. And as boys, stretching and rest time isn't isn't even really palatable, honestly. Like, especially like a young, impatient, fast moving kid like me. Um, it's like very, very luckily, like I was in martial arts when I was younger, so I knew it was important to be flexible. But if you play football, basketball, soccer, or any of the major sports, baseball, like you're not really stretching anywhere near as often as you're doing endurance training. So, and then obviously in school, like even just sitting in class, there should be like a stretch break, every now and then, like between 7 and 3. And so you just think that your body doesn't even need to stretch or you don't even think your body even needs that level of attention. And then you get into construction. What was really cool about my work history is my first like job myself was I was a grass cutter. So when I was like 14 to like 20, I had like what's called first class lawn care.
Good, honest young boy's first job.
And I remember telling my mom, I was like, Mom, my back hurts. She'd always say, Boy, you're too young for your back to hurt. Like, what do you mean your back hurts? And I'm like, we just get introduced to lifting. That also hurts your back, like deadlifts and certain compound lifting, and then like the competitive nature of lifting, all these types of things. And I think this is important too when it comes to men because this isn't always talked about. A lot of the times it's talked about like just the work career, but a lot of these dudes, they have back pain at 18. They don't have they it's not like there's probably 18, 19, 20 year olds right now that have back pain and they're just kind of told like, oh, it's not that bad or it's just whatever. And they're kind of looking at themselves like, what do you mean this is whatever? For me, like I had terrible back pain. It like reached a pinnacle um really right before I got into yoga because you have your work ethic or your work life that impacts your lower back, but you know, your energy centers that are there, like your root and your sacral center, are also there. So in our society too, that's a, a lot of that is deregulated, especially because of the food, how we interact with our environment, how we feel connected to the society that we lived in, whether we feel like we're
Mhm.
supposed to be here or not. So like, and then obviously, well, we didn't even know really that like how inflammatory processed foods are, how inflammatory fast food is, how inflammatory sweets are. So to me, and on top of that, tobacco too. Like if you smoke nicotine or any other drug or substance, maybe caffeine or any other substance that's inflammatory, like all of those things, they don't seem correlated, but they do impact like lower back, hip, outer hip, like inner hip pain. And what's so dope about yoga is like, you're doing it for the stretching, but then like all the other layers start to get adjusted a little bit more because it's like, okay, if I'm going to go to a class, like for me, and this might resonate more with guys, like if you're going to go to like a deep stretching class or like or like a more difficult class because you feel like you want a challenge, like you're not going to be able to eat poorly before that class. Like there have been times where I've almost thrown up in the middle of class. Sort of like when you play a sport, it's like you have to tailor your life around that activity. So as soon as you start to adopt yoga in your life, you're like, okay, maybe I can't eat that at that time. Maybe I can't eat as much as this, or now you start to notice like, okay, I ate that, and now my back is starting to hurt even more. So, I being in the construction industry, like I mean, I have the perfect example. Like I got a friend named Javier, because this is also a big thing about it too. It's like a lot of the folks aren't native born Americans. To me that was never like a bad thing because that's how it was all my life. But to the older superintendents, that's like to the more rural folks, that's like a little bit more touchy. But to like to a lot of those guys, like English second language, came here in their 20s or whatever, and they just started working and working and working and working, and like now you have a family, now you're trying to support your family. Like they're at the point where like by 45, like they can barely stand up straight, like, or they can work an 8-hour shift or a 10-hour shift or even 12-hour shift, and but as soon as they come home, it's like they can't do anything else. So in the construction industry, and also in like Home Depot and Lowe's, and like I also work stock in those types of spaces, like warehouse spaces. They do this thing called stretch and flex, where it's like it's like right before the shift starts, the whole crew meets up and you do some sorts of exercises. And that's what's been really beautiful to see over the last like 3 years, really since 2020, is like now, like as a superintendent, we would like not really mandate it, but we would like I've led ones for the whole crew. We've done like, and you encourage it, like at least do something. So they're doing little
Well, even
warrior.
mandating, like now they're saying, like, with workers' comp, like if you want to reduce your amount of workers' comp claims, then
Mhm.
mandating some, stretching for your crew is not a bad idea. Because again, our bodies are, we're working on such different levels too, Quentin. Like you touched on a couple things. I'm going to let you continue, but I just wanted to jump in here so I don't lose my train of thought because also, perimenopausal Radha sometimes loses her train of thought. Um,
Yeah, no problem.
when you're working with back pain, you're working with the physical part, you're working with the inflammation, but like you were saying, there's a lot of subtle energies that are
Hmm.
held in your lower back. So both nerve centers and then energetic centers. And then also, as we're talking about this today, I also just want to keep in mind, like the work of Dr. Sarno around pain and anger and trauma. And your trauma sits in your lower back. That's one of the main places. That's why we do so much like work with our psoas muscles, because that hip back area and those muscles that wrap around the body carry so much of your trauma. And so stretching that out and releasing that. I went to a pain specialist. This is like totally like, part of Martha Jefferson or Sentara Hospital. And I was just experiencing a lot of pain in my hips and knees. And everybody looked at everything and said, well, physically you're fine. And so he was like, literally, like, you're going to have to look at your trauma. And I was like, wait, what?
Nice
This
try.
is that you're supposed to give me a pill or something, or like
Yeah.
suggest an exercise or some physical therapy, something. You're not supposed to just tell me, hey, Radha, you're going to have to deal with your trauma if you want to be out of pain. And so even now, like, as I'm looking at like, the injury, like really witnessing like, okay, what am I angry about? Like, what is feeling really traumatic for me in my life that I would even have this injury in the first place? So when
Ooh,
you're talking about like, particularly men,
ooh.
like there's a lot of
We got to
anger in
stick
this,
on
right?
anger. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say,
Our society is
yeah.
not the greatest place. I mean, I kind of understand why there's a lot of men that are angry. And even though I don't agree with it, I understand why there's a lot of white men that are angry. But there's a lot of anger because there's also a lot of feeling of like, this is not how it was supposed to be. This was not what was promised to me.
Ooh, can I? I actually want to. Actually, I hear that a lot, but that's not what I see. What I see often is, ooh, this is gonna be tricky. Okay, so this is the things that I've been thinking about. Like, I know, like, I'm gonna speak for, not speak for, but I'm gonna speak about Black folk and then society more at large. Okay, because it's different, a little bit different. Now, like, let's say, like, in my community, for example, like my mother and her mother and her sisters, a lot of them that are in the generation that were born in the 60s, right? So they came to maturity in the early Reagan years or like 70s, maybe something like that. A lot of them are were matriarchs as in the sense of like,
Mm-hmm.
they have more power in the household for sure than like the men did. Now there's many reasons for that, like, some men's got roof of the household, this that and then other or whatever. But they were very powerful and dominant, right? And like so like a lot of the black women that we knew, they parented us trying to be like both halves, but their society's interpretation of the masculine half is through anger and through harshness. Like the state is a very harsh instrument, but it is a masculine instrument, if for lack of a better words, and it can act as a father figure. So Like, well, my dad's generation, he was born in the 40s and before, it was like even though the women were certainly, they certainly still had a stronger hand, but like there was still a little bit more of a balance where it was like, s- generally, typically we talk about, like, I love that you brought up men in anger, because I think that, like, in general, a lot of men, we 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 assess each other over how we manage our anger. And, like, a mature and appropriate man is essentially a man who only uses anger like exactly when necessary and uses it like very strategically.
Well, and traditionally, anger is the one emotion that men are allowed to have.
Yeah, men are
The
allowed to
one
be angry.
acceptable male emotion is anger. Like everybody
100%.
expects a man to get angry about something, but don't get too angry.
Yeah, don't get too,
You're
but
just
it's
supposed to
like,
have the right amount of anger.
yeah, just like this much. And so I think, like, a lot of folks that grew up with a more female prominent member in the house who viewed masculinity as through that aggressive, like that like through that harshness, because that's how it's been placed on them, then that, like, leads a lot of the younglings, like the kids that are my age or younger, especially when you're younger, when you don't like when you're more emotional and less like stable, like, to respond in anger more, because you're like, this is what men do. Men respond in anger. And you're not really seeing like men that have shown you how to manage your anger outside of certain environments, right? So with construction, like, what you said there, was really dope. Is like, the person that came to mind was like, and I'll mention him a couple times. Like, one of my favorite role models is this guy named Bob, Carpenter, and he was 40 years older than me. And it was crazy because he was extremely angry on the surface. Like, that was his way to run the job site. Like, it was through anger, it was through domination, it was like through that was like his general tactic on how to handle things. And he was old school, and he was like, I'm old school. I'm a product of my environment. My bosses were military police in World War II. His dad, like, he's like, and so he was, when the towers came down, he was like in his 40s. So a lot of the stuff that got built, like, on our side to fight wars, was built like by that generation of men who looked up to, like, the Vietnam slash the World War II kind of OGs that definitely ruled, like, through anger and domination. But what was so dope about what I learned from him was that no one else was as compassionate as him when it came to things that were truly extremely sensitive, like one trade sabotaging another trade, like, or like these, like, huge fights. It was almost like his mentality was like, I'll concentrate the anger in the job site in me. No one, like, I don't want any other fighting going on. Like, y'all can fight with me, but if it, like, boys will be boys type thing, if y'all want to fight, y'all can fight with me, and I'm good at fighting. I've been running work for 40 years. And he was a wrestler too, so he has that mentality. But when it came to, like, the toughest things, like, it was like he always used the soft hand. He always touched your soft corner. He was really, really big into rewarding people. He was like, yeah, I'll cuss you out if you're wrong, but I'll be the first person to let you know when you're right. So sometimes I see it sometimes as two sides of the coin. And another thing that was interesting too is that, like, he had the worst back pain. What was so dope about my experience working under him is that, like, he was a vice president at that point, but this was like his last job, so he wanted to be the senior superintendent on the job. He wanted to be on the job site, and and if you're from Nova, before that he was on Silver Line through Tyson's, like the new Metro, and a lot of other big jobs throughout the
Mhm.
years, but um he had really bad back pain. He had back surgery and all these kind of things, and he couldn't walk. Like, he could barely walk. Like, he could walk the job site maybe once or twice a week, maybe, and or, like, he could drive around it. So he had to rely on us, like, to be his eyes and ears out there on the job, and, like, really, like, be the filter for him. And what I think what was really like a blessing throughout this whole experience, and this is like how I think everything came full circle, was the job site his last job site had, like, the most women that has ever been on a job site that I've ever been on. There's like six or eight, all working directly for him, and it forced him to temper himself. Because he's
Wow.
so old school. He's like,
Yeah.
we're in mixed company. I can't. So it for and you can generally speaking, you can critique a man, but you can't usually use the same tone. Like, to get your point across authentically, like, And especially if you have daughters and a wife, you probably know this. Like you can't just talk to your wife the same way you talk to your homeboys, even though the love might be similar. Like you have to temper your tone. So all that's to say is that like yeah, what Rod is saying is absolutely true. Like anger, overworking yourself, not stretching, not taking care of yourself, but also looking at these deeper themes of trauma and being like, okay, maybe if I just get more money, I'll be able to like compensate for that. Or maybe if I work harder, I'll be able to, or maybe if I have a bigger house or do whatever. And all the while, you're literally working more, physically hurting your muscles, and you're not actually treating the root problem. And that's what I'll say about the work industry in general is like in this country, like the majority of the things that got built were built commercially through cheap labor, through slave labor in the very beginning, and then like just through cheap black labor. I got a lot of the black OGs. They tell me they're like when I first got in there was like Earl who was Bob's age and this other guy named Randy who was Bob's age, both in their late mid 60s. Laborers, like labor foremen, but worked with their hands all day. And they were all like, yeah, like basically their words were Mexicans, but just like Latinx folk or the new black folk. Back in the day, it used to be like kids like me that did all the construction work, and how. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to say that because I don't know if folks really know that. I think like a lot of folks, just like a little tidbit here, a little sidetrack is like people were like, oh, they're taking our jobs, and they think about like white folk, or they think about like they try to characterize like white people for being racist for folks coming across the border and taking their jobs, when in reality, the majority of the lower income workers were brothers. Um, in my
Hmm.
dad's generation. Anyways,
Yeah,
so
I think it's been a long time since like the majority of low income workers were
yeah, but
white.
that energy, that like the way that the industry comes from is through that like slave master mentality, that like dominant mentality. We're the general contractor. We have all the contracts. We write the contract so that it's like we basically have no fault and we can box anybody into a corner. Like one of the main reasons why subcontractors go out of business is because of the GCs, like the way that we write the contracts and the way that we don't help like the little guys out, and we hope and then we'll buy that subcontractor out once it's failed and we'll add it to our company, like type stuff. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, all that's to say is like, I really do come from that system and I understand exactly what you mean. And I think a lot of men are angry. What I was getting at is like, it's not that life isn't how it's supposed to be because, like I'm saying, in the construction industry or a lot of these things, it's like they're not really white men necessarily. But what I will say is they're just not living the life that they want to live in the sense of, like you're working 60 hours a week and you're barely spending any time with your kids,
Yeah.
or or you're not
There's very
liked in
little
your own
quality of
neighborhood.
life.
100%.
And I think
Yeah.
that's when I say like life's not what you were told it was going to be. It's like we're all brought up to believe that particularly like we've talked about before in this country, right? We have certain birthrights. And happiness is supposed to be one of them. Like we're all supposed to be happy. The pursuit of happiness is like built into our very structure. I don't like, I think in other cultures, happiness is not so important. Like they're not pursuing happiness for the sake of happiness. And so I think it's much more accepted that like there's going to be suffering. And that's like, as I was, one of the things that I was struggling with this week was I like to do things myself. I'm very independent. And not being able to do stuff for myself gave me a huge amount of frustration. Like that's what made me cry. Not so much the pain, but the
Mm.
inability to like do what I needed to do and not being able to overpower it and just move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the frustration of like this frustration of like, but I'm supposed to be able to. I'm supposed to be able to overcome anything. Instead of just being like acceptance of like, no, this is just part of suffering is part of life, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, like suffering just comes and it is just it's not like we're supposed to just have quote unquote happiness all the time. Now that doesn't mean we can't have peace and joy, and like we were talking before, there is like an inner part of us that is undisturbed. But as long as we're trying to find the happiness outside of ourselves, whether through good health, whether through relationships, whether through jobs, whatever it is. And I think that's where some of the anger comes from that causes some of that trauma. Like I often think about like, why did I end up with PTSD and not somebody else? Where was the stories that I told or the things that I clung on to about the situation that somebody else might not have? And so I think it's the same even with back pain. Like what's lurking in there where two people can be doing the same thing or even sustain the same injuries. And then one person is going to have the sustained pain from it and the other person's going to recover. And I think that comes from that feeling of like, I mean, the helplessness this week was mind boggling. It was so humbling. The just complete helplessness where I was like, I'd go to get up off the couch and I'd just be like, I can't get off the couch by myself. I have to have my husband come over and help me up off the couch. And then all the emotions that come up with that also of the like, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's a helplessness too that it's funny that the helplessness makes me angry.
The helplessness certainly leads to anger because there's something that just feels unjust about it. Where like even like you got your physical example, like you're physically stuck in this spot, but even people feel like that like in their life, like I'm stuck like this, like I'm just trapped like this. Like here I am, I'm at this point in my life, and I have to keep doing this, and it's just a keep system, and I have no like real mobility. Um, and then early on in Safa and I's like dating time together, I had a similar injury where I don't know what happened. I was like in the Chick-fil-A drive-through and I was like looking down. You know how when you look down, it's attached to like your low back like muscles deep down, like attached to your hip almost, lower spine, erector. So, anyways, I was like tucking my chin and I just felt a sharp pain. And I was like, oh damn, I wonder what that is. And then literally we go up the stairs to where she's at and we're just sitting there. I tuck my chin again to eat the food. From that point I just fell back and I didn't sit up for like another 2 days, three
My
days.
gosh.
It was just like, but I feel like it's like it was probably an accumulation of some things, but that feeling where you're like, wow, like I can't even leave. This isn't even my house. Like, like, like I don't even, like I don't have anything. I don't feel comfortable here. And I know this isn't right. Like, and same thing like with playing football, like the last couple of days, because I was like, for me, I was like, wow, I remember making catches like this, like it's nothing. Like I used to do this literally every single day. I used to play football in pads and two and tackle football with my homies, and here I am playing two-hand touch football, just catching a pass, no one's touching me, and now I can't even breathe deep for several days. And
Yeah,
I love, you know, I love that you emphasize that and how a lot of us feel like just whatever happens to us shouldn't happen to us, like you're saying, like this isn't supposed to happen. Like a lot of guys, for example, too, like women too, of course, and I'll also touch on the women pain aspect because I have a little story about that too. But on the more masculine side, it's almost like I'm supposed to be able to provide for my family and work this hard every single day. I'm supposed to be able to do this, but I can't. And deep down you can't, but and you have your family that relies on you. And I'll also say, like, the uncomfortable truth is a lot of marriages are very difficult, and a lot of men that go to work, like, they're not really happy in their marriage, like holistically, or at least you couldn't tell by talking to them. You know what I mean? And so there's probably a lot of strife. You might have been a lot of just interpersonal conflict that might even be contributing to your pain.
absolutely. I mean, the
Um,
balance of relationships, Quentin, is really weird sometimes in our culture too. Like women are very focused on their children, and often the husbands do get left behind because of the focus on the children. And not to blame the women, because obviously, like, somebody's got to be
yeah,
focused on the children.
yeah.
But that is very, it's so funny because I even see these subtle differences. Like, I don't have children myself, but since we got Henson and Henson's with me, 24/7,
Yeah.
um, I focus a lot of energy and affection on Henson that maybe
Mm.
used to go to D.
Yeah.
But Henson's there now all the time. And he does the same thing. So, at least we recognize that Henson sleeps in the bed with us. Like there's a lot of stuff. And so that affection or that focus on each other sometimes then gets transferred to our dog, which,
Yeah.
again, in our case, it's a dog, but in many relationships, it becomes the children. When you have children, that really transforms your relationship. And if you are not being aware and mindful all the time, it can slip away from you really easily and really quickly. And so I think that's true. A lot of people are not happy in their relationships because just the grind also, I mean, just raising children as a couple as opposed to a village is a lot. I mean,
Hmm.
my mom had 6 children, so like we always had children around. And she always said it was much easier to have 10 children in the house than just the 6 of us.
Hmm.
Right? She says it's much easier to have 2 or 3 children than to have one because that one
Hmm.
child takes so much energy. Whereas when you have other children your children are distracted, so they're not harassing you the whole time about like, mom, 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 mom. They're out playing. They're like being part of their little village. And so when you have other adults even around, there's more parents to go to ask about stuff. And that's why we have play groups and all of these things. But like in traditional cultures, the families would have lived as family units. There would have been more people raising the children, more people involved, and it takes a little bit of that pressure off when done well. I mean, I'm not saying
Absolutely.
every situation like that is ideal because having a lot of people in the house also has its own challenges.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I relate to that on so many levels. It's like, you know, Toph and I, yeah, I could relate to that wholeheartedly. I would say like that's even probably one of the main points of contention because like just from a masculine point of view, it's like, you know, it's not that guys only care about one thing, but that's safe to say. Like, we want to be touched, we want affection. Like, really, that's it. Like, we're doing all this physical work, all this physical. Those of us that are in that space that we're talking about all that physical work, or even if it's just sitting at a desk for 10, 12 hours a day, and then just being stressed about whatever's going on. Like, and then all of the affection that you're hoping to get when you come home is given to your dog or your kid or something like that. And it's like I love my child too, don't get me wrong, but I just think like a man's nature also with his children is different. Like men play with their children. Obviously there's affection too, but stereotypically the way that we bond with others is through play, either competition or playing or wrestling or doing something like this. But a lot of the way that we really want to be loved and affected is to like that feminine style of being held and just being nurtured and just being okay with like not having to do anything, just being. And I would even say, like, for me, like, when I was growing up, I have a sister. My mom's daughter is 13 years older than me. So by the time I was 5, I was pretty much an only child. And, like, that certainly leads to contention because, like, and I've certainly realized this is that, like, the way that the mother, or I'm not even gonna say mother, I'll say like feminine energy or the way that estrogen, whatever, manifests as a way to take care of others is different than testosterone. Like a lot of the lessons that I have in my mind, like of being in the village, were like, you got to be fucking tough. You got to be tough. You have to be durable. You have to have faith in your stamina. Like life is gonna call on you to do things that are gonna push you physically. So like a dad will just be like, that's fine. Like you know what I mean? He'll
Yeah.
try to develop that within you, but at the same time, and that is love. 100%. Like you cannot work in construction or be in the military if like you haven't had some of that in your life, or you can, you'll just be, it'll be
Tired.
a culture shock for you.
Yeah.
Um, but then sometimes like the the feminine instinct is to like to be compassionate when someone else is in pain and be like, let me see how I can help make that better for you. And
I just want to say I'm really glad that you're specifying like also male and female energy because those are very distinct things, particularly in Western culture. We have very strict ideas about what those fall into. We are seeing more and more young men, particularly in Western culture, who are adopting more sensitive methods of sensitive. I don't know if that's the word. I don't even want to say feminine because that's weird. They're adopting other methods of interacting with their children that tend to mimic more what we traditionally think of as motherly energy. There are a lot of men who are very engaged, very hands-on, feed their children, are the ones who
100%.
wake up with their kids in the night. There is much more hands-on activity now with young men with their children, I think, than traditionally we had. Um, and that's an amazing thing. I think like all of our society is going to be better for that balance.
Hmm.
Uh, But I do think it's like still there are older generations where that just wasn't even possible or encouraged or,
You know?
you know, men weren't allowed to be in the delivery room. They weren't allowed to watch their
Yeah.
babies be born.
Yeah.
I think
That's
like
crazy.
I think it actually changed throughout the course of me and my siblings being born. Where like my older sister, I think my dad wasn't in the delivery room, and then slowly like
They
they
will let you in
started
here.
allowing them into the delivery room. Can you imagine? Like they wouldn't
That's
even let the
crazy.
dad in.
I feel like that's where they should be.
Yeah.
I mean, naturally. I mean, like I gotta just keep going on this topic because, like, my grandfather and my father, you know, it's a little bit different with my father because I was born when my dad was 50, so it was a little bit different for him. But like, especially my grandfather, the way that my aunt, my dad's sister, tells it was that like granddad was the soft-handed one. It was grandma who was more rough around the edges. They had like 11 siblings, so like there was that interesting dichotomy too, where it's like it probably wasn't like super hands-on, but like the movie scene narrative of a man, I've like come to realize, especially like with my uncles or like just a lot of the older men that I know in my life, especially the older black men, like they're not like sensitive per se, but they are very like sweet and tender and kind, and they're very much more like my dad was much more hands on, for example, especially because he was older when I was growing up, and I think like he realized that too. He might have been harsher when he was younger, but he was like, I'm getting older, I don't have much life left, like I might as well spend a lot of time with this little boy here, like and learn some things, and show him some things, but that's what I also found too. It was like, and that was one of the points of contention between my parents. Is like my dad was like, your mother has an idea of how a man is based off of her idea of what a man is, but you know yourself. Like I knew myself, I knew my dad, I knew my uncles. Like we were very like soft and kind. We really cared about like we liked to do things that were harsh, more so probably of a function of testosterone and some of the reward systems that it has. But generally speaking, it's like we just want to be cool. We just want to have a good time with each other. We want to be soft and tender with each other, and however that comes across. And but on TV or when I was a kid, it was like rappers, like all that, like that's sweet. Like don't do that. Like don't try to like get close to don't try to get close to each other. But it was like my dad's generation, the Marvin Gaye generation, the Bob Marley generation, like they weren't like that. The peace and love generation, and that's where I'm from. So there was always that contrast of like the younger kids that were a little bit harsher, trying to live like a quote unquote masculine lifestyle by like listening to dudes argue all the time. Like it was always weird to me. I was like, how is this masculine to be in male spaces all the time? Or like, like if all you do is watch sports and or like listen to like very, very masculine music, it's like, where guys are just yelling at you or this stuff isn't really masculine. Like in a sense, it's like to me, masculine means like interested in the feminine, like you're like trying to bring that balance together, you're trying to like you're trying to merge spirits. And um so to me in construction it's certainly been that same arc where construction was extremely masculine, like girls weren't allowed to wear pants, I heard, until like the 2000s, and in the construction industry they had to wear skirts. And then now, like I said, my first job site and furthermore job sites now where it's like more and more and more and more women are getting introduced to these fields. And these fields are trying to grapple with like, okay, how do we now we're being forced to introduce more compassion because now literally speaking, like the people that are running the company have a more natural tilt in that direction. But also like we have to figure out ways to attract talent now. We have to do different things. So that's what I find like that's what I really like about like the construction industry today, and what I tried to embody and what I've seen in other superintendents is they really
Yeah.
do, like the strongest of them balance out both qualities. Where I like the way that the Bhagavad, when Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, like I don't know it all off the top of my head, but he's basically saying like amongst the feminine or amongst the women, he's explaining. So Krishna is essentially explaining God's qualities, and he's like trying to use different similes and metaphors and like different ways to sort of explain like um I would say like supernaturalness or whatever. Like the one that like sticks out easy. It's like when you think of the sun, I am like the effigiance or like the extra luster, or I'm the luster on shiny things. Like I'm that little, like that little bit of extra. When it comes to the months, I'm the months. When it comes to months, I'm the months of November, December, like Sagittarius season, or like. Um, but anyways, because he's like, when it comes to women, I am fame, I am beauty, and a couple other things. I think it was like compassion and something else. So what you see is that like it's no longer important to just be like powerful and rough and gruel in how to have a successful job site. In order to have a successful job site now, you have to be much more holistic and well-rounded in your approach. And I think that that can be extrapolated into any area of life where, like, even if you do have a partner, it might benefit you to like look at that partner and say, hey, how can I grow more in balance and more in tune with the way they think. And I think oftentimes when it comes to children, you get so like rooted in your side of thinking that you're like, there's no way that, like, if this is the right answer, then any other answer is the wrong answer. And we get so attached to like being right about a particular thing. And then when you feel like your partner or someone else is threatening your child, you get angry, or like naturally, or threatening your dog, you get angry. And then you also feel helpless too, because you're like, I'm married to this person. I'm bonded to this person. Even if we get divorced, we still have a kid together. And so that adds to the anger, that adds to the frustration. Um,
Mhm.
all those things coupled together, like, definitely lead to the pain epidemic. And I think we should say that, like, the like the sad part, which is like these pain medications, they feel good. Like if you've ever taken, like, I got my wisdom tooth pulled, and I didn't even really need the medication years ago, but I had like plantar fasciitis in my foot, and I just remember taking Oxy or whatever it was that the dentist gives you, and it's like your whole body feels in a way that you've never felt before. And a lot of folks, like, they don't like tree or like weed, they don't believe in psychedelics or any of these other things, but they're like, well, opioids are kind of in a different category, right? Like this
Well,
is
they're
like,
also in a different category because my doctor gave it to me.
exactly. My
So
doctor gave
therefore,
it.
it's not a drug.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
perfectly safe pain medication. That's why we started going through like this epidemic of overdoses too, is because people were like, but it's safe. It's safe to take all these things, right? And they weren't realizing, no, you can't take, first of all, you shouldn't be taking them constantly. They shouldn't be chronically taken. And then when you're mixing them together, it can be a really dangerous concoction, which again, leads to accidental drowning. I was just reading up on like Whitney
yeah.
Houston again the other day of like, she was taking just a combo of things that were not quote unquote. I mean, she had cocaine, I guess, in her system, but everybody kind of knew she was doing cocaine. But it was not just the cocaine, it was like the things that were legal that actually were the ones that I think ended up killing her because the combo of them was really, really dangerous. And same with like, I guess Heath Ledger, right? Even Prince, all of these people that we lose because of and again, many of them are taking them for pain. And then, but they're not really working. Like, I don't know if you experience this, but every time I've taken a pain medication, especially the heavier ones, for me, it's almost like the pain it's like disassociated from me. The pain never really goes away. It doesn't actually solve the pain. It just sort of disassociates it away from me a little.
Hmm.
But then I'm like, but the pain's not gone. Like, you got to take more because the
Yeah,
pain's not,
yeah, yeah.
it
It's like
actually
it's still
solve the
there.
pain.
Mm,
And so then you're like, well, I probably need to take more, right? Or it's not enough. Clearly, because the other thing is this belief that we have. So I do think in some ways it's your birthright to be pain free. We say that a lot in yoga, right? Like it's your birthright to be pain free. The reality is no. These bodies have pain for reasons, their reactions to things going on. I know, I don't know if I even know anybody who's pain free, who never goes through any pain. Pain
yeah,
is a system that's in place in our bodies, but we think we should be pain free. So then when we experience pain, we're like, I need to get rid of it. It needs to go right away. Like,
yeah.
that's not my birthright. Like, I got
Wouldn't
to
it
get rid of the
justice?
pain. I'm afraid of the pain. So, yeah, I think that there's ways to mitigate the pain, to relieve the pain. Like, I used a lot of heat, hot and cold, right? I mean, anybody's going to tell you ice and heat are just brilliant ways to deal with our systems, right? There's something about that's why cold plunge and saunas and that system is so beneficial for us. Our bodies really respond well to that like kind of intense shock of those experiences. Um, Tiger Balm, I used a whole heck of a lot of Tiger Balm.
Yep.
Everybody's like, oh, biofreeze or whatever. I was like, I don't think there's any biofreeze in the world that works as well as like some old ancient
Yeah.
Chinese medicine of Tiger Balm.
100%. You got to keep Tiger Balm in your purse. Like I got a Tiger Balm on me.
Everybody, if you're at home listening and you do not have a jar of Tiger Balm in your cabinet, you better go out and get some right now because it is. I mean, I don't like it. I don't like menthol. I was always one of those kids like my mom was always trying to smear Vicks all over me when I would
Yeah,
get
yeah.
sick.
Same here.
I do
Hmm.
not like that at all. But man, when I need some pain solution,
Meditate.
Tiger Balm is
Yeah.
amazing. Arnica cream. I also used a lot of that to help because the arnica is homeopathic and is actually going to be like healing rather than just like masking the pain like an aspirin cream might.
100%.
So, something like that in your arsenal. And then again, being very, again, food is also like if you're suffering from some kind of pain injury, sugar does cause inflammation. I'm a big fan of sugar. I eat a lot of sugar. I like sugar. I'm not one of those people who thinks like I need to eliminate sugar from my life. I'm highly tolerant of sugar. And I know that if my body's in pain, I don't want my body utilizing any cushion it has to be able to metabolize the sugar or deal with the sugar. I need that sugar to be like toned down so that my body can do the work of healing. And that same goes with, other things that you may have inflammatory reactions to. It's individual, but it could be dairy or wheat or I have a thing with romaine lettuce.
Hmm.
I don't I am obsessed with romaine lettuce. I love it so much, but I have done like different tests. Like I did a hair sensitive, um, food sensitivity test, and then we've done like, elimination food tests. And I know that romaine and I don't always get along. So I'm like, well, now is not the time to be eating romaine. Like you got
100%.
to wait till your body's healing and like healthy again before you can introduce those things. So like certainly any way that you can mitigate that. And then of course, once you can get yourself up off the couch, cat cow. Like, wow. I just again like always been one of my favorite poses because it is just like such a powerful pose. And I think when you get like more advanced in your practice or you start doing a lot of things, like people forget about just the simplicity and the power of cat cow. And I really think it's one of those ones that everybody should be doing, regardless of what level of yoga you practice. It's such a gentle, beautiful way to just really warm up your spine and get your spine moving in all the different ways that it needs to be moving. And I think it's one that we skip a lot, especially as we get more advanced in our practice. But I
100%.
was just really reminded again, like how incredible and powerful it is just for really simplicity child's pose.
Yep.
Such a powerful practice, especially if you were having lower back pain, releasing the lower back pain. Interestingly enough, it ends up that my pain was not from my lower back. It's actually from my right hip.
Mm.
But it's causing seizing in my lower back because of the hip was pinching a nerve. Um,
Mm.
so anything also nerve tonics, things that can calm your nervous system down, breathing, nutty shooty, because that's also a nerve tonic, right? Like that's a really good one. And all of these things, like sometimes you have to cycle through them to figure out the ones that are really going to support you and your particular system. But they're all really simple things that can keep you from resorting to the heavy narcotics, which again, if narcotics worked in eliminating your pain, there would not be an addiction problem with them, right? People would take them, the pain would be eliminated, and then you'd give them up and it would be all good. So you got to figure out other ways to feel good in your body, and gently moving your body is just, that's why martial arts, particularly things like Tai Chi, are so powerful, moving the energies also through your system. Because when you're doing the physical postures, they are physical, but there's a lot of subtle energies that move through your system and are happening on a lot of subtle levels. And I think remembering about all of those is really key
Mm.
because any kind of stuckness that you're having in your muscles, your back, your subtle bodies, those really need the practices to be able to move them through there.
Mm.
And then realizing like, oh, it's not just that I pinched a nerve or I have a bulging disc or I have a this, but realizing that it can be really something much more subtle than just something like I fell and hurt myself or I twisted.
Yeah. Yeah. All that's I have like some things to add on to that. Like everything
Yeah.
that Radha just said, like yes, try do all of those things. Um, even fast, like, try to
Hmm.
get into ketosis because you got to look at it like this. It's like your body is always trying to heal itself. You just might have things in the way. You could look at it more so like I might be impeding my own healing. So what are the things that are in my system that might impede my ability to heal? Um, and so sometimes fasting helps get rid of some toxins, drinking good water, eating lighter, like not eating as heavy. Especially like with this rib injury, the first thing we did because I was starving was we got like a big bowl of Chipotle, and that like added to the pain so much more. Because and it's my left side, so I couldn't lay on my left side, so I had to lay on my right side or on my back. So it took forever for the food to digest. Whatever, but what I like to do personally, like for any health ailment, is um, I like to mantra over and over again. I have perfect health. I have perfect health. I have perfect health. Because ultimately, we have to rely on our immune system. There's this book that I really like called Power of Your Subconscious Mind, written by Robert Murphy, and I even got the name Life Word from it. And there's a line in there. It's called "The tendency of your subconscious is life word. It's trying to support you forward for life." And so that's why I like to do the mantra. I just try to prime my mind and get my mind in a space where instead of focusing on the owies or how I can't move or how much this sucks, I just say I have perfect health. You know, a lot of us, like, what we're saying here is like a lot of us have been through many, many things, and it's like I've been injured before. Maybe it's not this particular way, but I've been injured before. So sometimes just reminding yourself, like, you do have this system, you do have a force that's at your back that wants you to heal whole and correctly. And all the pain is in that direction. Like, when you find out all the symptoms of a cold or just your body trying to destroy that which is harming you. Swami Sajananda would say, you know, when you're fasting, for example, you might get a headache, or even when you stop trying to smoke or stop drinking or doing these drugs, like you'll go through withdrawals. But those withdrawals, that suffering, like ultimately is for your own benefit. It's a part of detoxification. Now, of course, there are some,
Water, just as you're talking about, if you have a headache, if you're going through any kind of headache, water.
yeah,
Water's your friend.
water.
Drink so much water.
Water. It's like just make sure you don't have any like. I had a friend from Ghana. He's like, this is something we say in Ghana. He's like, if you have a headache, water or poop. And basically, it's like you just have toxins in you. And what I like to add on to that is breath work, maybe some rapid breathing, some deep breathing, just to get some additional toxins out, and just kind of replenish the system. I feel like that's worked. So
But if you
so
have a
the
headache, you don't necessarily want to do that.
do what?
Do rapid breathing.
No, well, I would say like deep breathing, but
Yeah.
just something that doesn't hurt your head more while it's happening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're doing something and it's hurting your head more, you're like, no, don't do that.
Water's a pretty easy one to start with because water's not generally going to hurt you if you're in pain. So it's always good. I'm always being practical, Quentin. I'm always like, start with the easiest thing and then you can build into the complexity. Like, yes, I'm totally into like doing all the things in the big way. But I'm like, okay, but somebody out there is going to be like, there's no way I'm going
Yeah,
to do that. Like,
I have
Kapalabhati when I have a headache.
yeah, like, I have a level 10 migraine. And you just got you're gonna make me blow my eyebrows out. Yeah, I
Exactly.
feel
But
you.
that when you don't have the migraine, maybe when you're not in the active pain, Kapalabhati is just, it's such an incredible way to move things through your system and lungs and like oxygen. Like, with this whole reactive airway thing, I really appreciate the power of oxygen and how that deep breathing can really like replenish your body and like sending oxygen out to all the different parts so they can heal is really, I had no clue. This sounds so silly. When I first started suffering from muscular issues due to the reactive airway disease, I didn't know what it was. We thought I had Lyme disease. We treated me for chronic fatigue. We treated me for all these things. And literally, I was teaching Zumba at the time, and I would be so sore after I would finish teaching Zumba, I could barely walk afterwards.
Mm.
And so I stopped teaching Zumba. And then years later, I was trying to exercise, and my muscles just weren't recovering. I've always done pranayama because obviously it's just a part of, my kind of daily practice or just my go-tos. And I really like pranayama, you know, it's, I really enjoy it. And Kapalabhati, I tend to enjoy that more than the more calming breaths. Um, but I had no idea, like until they got me the inhaler, and all of a sudden I was starting to get all the oxygen back into my lungs and my lungs were breathing again.
Mm.
But I was like, oh, what I was doing was like not enough to
Mm.
sustain the damage that was being done. And then once I understood, like, oh, it's like all this oxygen has to be created and I can't overdo it. I have to, that's the other, oh God, that's the other thing. The
Mm.
humility of, and maybe this is like also being 53, right? The humility of the limitation is so incredible because
Mm.
it's not about pushing through. It's not about doing the most intense thing. It's about honoring your body, honoring where you're at, honoring the space, honoring your system, honoring the because pushing through and being like a superstar, it's the same with when you're in yoga class, right? We all want to be the most limber, strong, coolest person on the mat. But that's not necessarily what's best for you.
Mhm.
What could be best for you is to just do cat cow that day. And that is such a
100%.
humiliating experience for me.
100%. Yeah, yeah,
I
because
like to be a super overachiever. And so being the one, being like, this is where I'm at and this is what I get to be today. So it's the same thing with like even the breathing. Realizing like maybe it's not all these bigger things, but I just have to start with the breathing and, you know,
yeah. I mean, it's crazy because like when I had this injury in particular, like, or even allergies, some injuries impede your capacity to practice, right?
absolutely.
Obviously, but I feel like, you can always visualize. So like another thing that I like to do was like I do a lot of mental stuff. So whenever like to help me get through things because physically in the real life, like we know we have an immune system that's trying to recover us, right?
Mhm.
So generally speaking, like you're gonna, you can hope, you're gonna heal at some point. It might be different, but at some point it's gonna be different. Like you're gonna be at a more of a homeostasis level. So to me, it's like the only time where you don't really experience pain is when your mind isn't on it. Like and so really that's the only thing. It's like, you can do a bunch of other things, but if your mind is concentrating on the fact that you're in pain and you're also negatively judging that pain, because also a lot of people are um very closely connected to how they feel. Like sensuality, or if you will, plays a larger role in us. We're all on a longer spectrum. So like if you're feeling uncomfortable, like that is going to have an impact on your mood, and that varies from person to person. Um,
And pain is
so-
very cyclical, like it's not constant. There's
yeah.
this incredible elder in our community who I don't think you've met, Quentin, but when you come back to visit, his name is Galen, and he's just this like old wizened, like extraordinary, like smells like a medicine man. He's just really amazing. And so about, I don't know, like in my mid 30s or something like that, he was doing all these like mind exercises with us. And
Mm,
one of the things he had us really doing was observing pain and breathing into the pain. And you start to realize like pain's not a constant. If you think it's constant, but there's actually,
yeah.
it comes and goes, but our
Mm,
minds just make it constant. And so it's our
mm,
mind that makes the thread of it. Whereas actually there's these moments in between where the pain ceases. And so if one of the exercises we were doing was meditating on the in between spaces. And
that's
it's
cool.
really powerful because if you can find that relief, in that in between space, it actually does ease up the pain. So, like you're saying, sort of with the visualization, I think it's kind of the same of like finding those in between reliefs, that then realizing it's not a constant, 'cause it's the constant that grinds us down, I think, or the perception of the constant.
It's the perception of the constant projected into the future. So it could also be like, and there's also another thing when you get hurt, and you forget this, but you always get worse before you get better. Like you contract the disease, then you suffer the consequences of the disease, and then you get better. It's like this is how it goes. That's a part of the cycle. I love that you emphasize that. Um, and but so what ends up happening is like now you're in peak pain or whatever, and you have all the right to be in pain. Like and what I say too is like express the pain. That's another thing too. Like even we talk about men too in general is like just express I'm in pain. Ow, like I'm sorry, like because when you try to just fight yourself and your body's not making you want to grunt or moan, it might be annoying to your wife, but it's not making you do that because it's trying to let that energy out. So allow yourself to feel that physical pain emotionally too. But what I like to add to the visualization is like instead of what like we've mentioned before, we automatically mantra, we automatically project into the future. So you're automatically thinking like, oh no, like there's all this stuff I have to do. For example, I'm not gonna be able to do it tomorrow or the next day or the next day or whatever. And what I like to do and the advice I would give is like just visualize yourself better. Like you might not be better right now, but instead of assuming that tomorrow or the next day or the next day or the day after that, like things are gonna suck and this is gonna hurt and you're just gonna feel this pain forever, you can imagine yourself just in a stronger position. Because at the very least, even I do feel like why I referenced the power of the subconscious mind before is like I really do feel and I've experienced that what you do emphasize and focus your attention on will start to happen. If you start to emphasize, like, even when I've had a headache, like there will be days where I'll have a headache and I'm like, oh, I really don't like this headache. And I'll concentrate my attention on the headache and it feeds the headache. Or I'll have a headache and I'll intentionally not concentrate on the headache. And then say the pain doesn't go away, but I lose attention of it. And by the time my attention reemerges to be like, oh, what happened to the headache? It might be faint or it might be gone. So even
Yeah, and
if
if you need a place to start with that, check out Joe Dispenza. He's got some amazing meditations that are really focused on pain and healing yourself that are really powerful. And his books are really fascinating anyway. Learning how he healed his back with visualization it's a powerful story. So
100%,
if you're not really familiar with Joe Dispenza, Dr. Sarno
check
and
it
Joe
out.
Dispenza, if you were in pain, those are two people really to check out. And I love the fact that now, originally what they were saying, people thought was really woo woo, and they were like, well, that's just too out there. But now, again, a lot of the work that they were doing is being backed up by science.
I even say, and this is the thing, like, in a lot of my pain management too is it's also reflected too because of like sports and athletics and like just getting injured is like, if you're a martial artist, getting injured is like inevitable. If you play football, like it's inevitable. Like so, you're not really anticipating that you're not going to experience pain, but you do. Like I will say, learning is a skill. Not learning, healing is a skill. Even if you have the same disease from different times that you experience, like cold sores, good example for me. Every time you get a cold sore, like it does give you an opportunity to practice healing, practicing how to treat yourself, and realizing the symptoms or the predecessors to that activity that caused you to have an outbreak or some sort of issue.
Acne,
So
too.
acne, yeah,
If you have
yeah.
acne, that's a great one to practice healing.
Yeah, so it's like, so healing is an art too. So you can also be gracious with yourself. Be like, I haven't really been hurt that much. I don't really know how this healing thing goes. I'm learning this. I haven't had my rib injured. I'm just learning how to heal this part of my body. I like and take a more curious approach to take some of that weight off and take some of that and downgrade the anger because the problem with the anger is that it's just not productive to the healing process. That's really it. Like, or any of these like these extra energies that are pulling away you could just think of it that's pulling away from my pool to heal myself and get myself back to whole. And that doesn't mean that like you have to, like I said, you don't have to ignore any of the pain. You can feel the pain. This is throbbing, this hurts, I can't move, and at the same time like you know visualizing yourself in a better position. So like for like Radha's example of like being stuck on the bed, maybe it's not imagining yourself moving a bunch of heavy boxes or doing, sometimes we might imagine ourselves doing exactly what we wanted to do right before we got injured, and and then your visualization then is gonna it's not realistic and practical. But the first second is like, I just want to imagine myself just sitting up.
Hmm.
And then now when you're sitting up, maybe you can't stand yet, but then you can start to visualize, okay, maybe after I sit up, I can stand up. That's what I mean. Baby steps with the visualization, rather than like visualizing out of your control, but also visualizing the worst case scenario. I do want to also with the visualization, I was saying about the toxins. A lot of us have pain in the low back, hips, like for diet and lifestyle related issues. One of my favorite yoga instructors is just like, when you're stretching your hip or when you're doing any of these additional stretches that we've mentioned, cat cow, I would even say like seated forward fold, maybe like butterfly or dive. Butterfly is when your heels a little bit closer to when the soles of your feet are together and they're closer to your groin, or diamond is where like your knees are at 90 degrees and your feet are farther away from your groin. Those are two great hip openers. The traditional one is like pigeon. That's a little bit intense, which you can do, but what I've really found, what helps a lot with like the lower back is head to knee. So basically, imagine you're in butterfly, but you extend one leg. This is like a real traditional stretch. So you have the sole of your foot and the hip crease of your opposite, in your inner groin of your opposite leg, and you can do you're just gonna forward fold and kind of stretch that one leg hamstring, or you can try to twist open and open your chest to the side that your knee's bent. That's called, revolved to the knee. Basically, you're just trying to open up your chest and get like a nice side body stretch. I find that's a good one. And then the last
I feel
one,
like your hamstring also, Quentin,
yeah,
just let me jump in and say your
uh,
hamstrings are really key because I have incredibly flexible hips. Like, as far as opening them, I've been sitting on the floor since I was a little kid, but I've always had really tight hamstrings, and that's where my hip
mhm,
issues come from, is the tighter hamstrings. So making sure, like knowing that there's balance, because there's going to be people who are going to be talking about loose hips, stretch your hips, and there, it's true in Western culture we need to do a lot of hip stretches, but don't forget those hamstrings, especially if you're an athlete,
100%.
because
Yeah,
that's
get the
where mostly when we work with athletes in yoga, the most common thing, particularly I guess maybe because I've worked with football or basketball players more, but when you're looking at them, those hamstrings are so tight.
yeah, yeah, extremely and hips like, oh, and yeah, so you definitely want to hit those. I would say another thing, another really good one that's in the Integral Yoga typical sun salutation, but it's just like a low lunge. So you have like you have one knee on the ground. Let's say you start with your left side. You have your left knee on your ground. You have the right foot on the ground, and you're sort of kneeling. You have your right knee directly over your right ankle, right? So you have like a 90-degree bend in that knee. And a lot of folks cue like kind of being upright and leaning into it, like kind of pulling your hips forward to get a deeper psoas stretch and left quad stretch since your left knee's on the ground. Um, Now what I also like to do is like you can add in like slowly curling your chin in and opening up your neck to also get a little bit deeper in the low back muscles. So maybe like five stretches, um 30-second holds each, morning and evening, maybe midday, depending on what you got going on. If you can't hit any of those time slots, like could also do wonders, even if you're not even in a class. Coupled with the
The
hot and cold.
twist, don't forget your
Yeah.
twist.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. You hit,
Can't forget
yeah,
your
and then you hit a
twist.
nice twist.
Like
Yeah.
backwards, forwards, twist,
Yeah.
inversion,
Yeah.
that's like your basic quick yoga class.
Yeah. But for like, yes, and so many people come and they're like, my hips are so tight, and basically a lot of folks just don't know how long to stretch. Like if you played a sport, you were told like 10 seconds is enough, maybe 15 seconds is enough. But if especially if you're not stretching often and if you're not doing a full sequence, you definitely want to give yourself a chance to find your edge, which is which will change each day, like Radha said. Like there's going to be a day where you can barely fold forward, even though yesterday you damn near had your chest on the ground. And but don't be discouraged. Maybe you can't hold it for as long. Maybe you need to do a different counter stretch or something else that moves your body in the opposite direction of what you've just moved in. Like just to give you some time. Maybe you need more space in between the stretches. Whatever
And
it
in
is.
general, they say like 80%. Don't go above 80% of what you can stretch. That's a fairly good way because stretching can lead to injury very
Hmm.
easily. You can overstretch and you can pull something. So always think when you're stretching, And if you want to go deeper into it, use the breath. Don't use pressure. So allow the breath to ease you deeper into the stretch as opposed to pulling or tensing. Whereas if you allow it to come through the breath, then that's where it's pretty easy to do 80% because the breath won't really be able to push you past 80%,
Yes.
right? So if you're allowing the breath to do the stretching rather than a tension stretch, then that can really help you prevent that. It can create a lot of benefit and prevent you from getting injured while you're stretching. Because believe me, lots of people get injured doing yoga, and there's a lot of yogis who are having hip replacements now. A lot of advanced yogis. All these people who were like big, hip, hot yoga teachers in the 90s, 2000s,
Hmm.
um, a lot of them are getting hip replacements. So don't think that yoga is in and of itself safe. You can certainly injure yourself doing yoga if you're not doing it in a mindful, you know, uh, prescribed way. But the breath will never let you down.
100%.
If you rely on the breath to move you, then you cannot get injured with the breath moving you.
Yeah. So I think, um, I guess like the last topic I guess I would bring up, or like last subject on this, would be,
Because I'm not going to be able to sit in this chair for
yeah,
much longer.
I can tell, I can tell. I'm like, I see you do this, and I'm like,
I'm getting a little wiggly, aren't
no,
I?
you're good, you're good. I was looking at it, I was like,
This is
okay,
where I
okay.
get to be very humble and mindful and admit to you all that I'm not going to be able to sit upright in this chair a whole lot longer today.
I'll be quick. I'll be quick. And I love that you're bringing this up. Um there's this guy. He's partnered with Governor Rick Perry, or ex-Governor Rick Perry of Texas, but it's called the Ibogaine Initiative. Um, it's like a lawyer, a guy from West Virginia or Kentucky or something like that. But basically, Ibogaine is, for lack of a better word, psychedelic, but it's like a from West Africa, and they're giving it to all the, not giving, I shouldn't say it like that, but heavy in the vet community, who are really dealing with all of these kind of things that we're talking about, all put together, and they have really honestly like life debilitating injuries as well. So they find that ibogaine is legal in Mexico and a lot of different places, and they have like legit facilities in Mexico City, not like, some backwoods place, but where they administer ibogaine, and they just passed the initiative in Texas. I think they have like I don't know how much, like $50 billion in funding for research and stuff like that. But I do. We talked about plant medicine before, and we talked about opioids. Like there is, I do believe it is true that like the earth does have what we need. Like, you know um it has what we need, and it can't meet our greed, but it does have exactly what's necessary. And like what they're finding out is that like all of these, like the pain that we're talking about that might be sourced from a more spiritual cause. um you can do cat and cow, you can do hot and cold, but like, or even sometimes therapy, or these certain things that like, but they don't really bring holistic healing. Sometimes the trauma is just so acute that like you need like surgery, spiritual surgery, and that,
Spiritual surgery. I
yeah,
love
that
it.
only like,
Yeah.
that only these things can bring, at least from what because it's like if you have one leg, or and your buddy died, like me saying to you, hey, let's sit in meditation for a while, like that's
Just
not
do
going to
some
do.
more cat cow. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So what's
Being
so,
said, I'm going to sidetrack. Just I'm making you a joke there, but
yeah,
I had a cousin who he got back from Vietnam. He had not slept through the night since he was in Vietnam.
wow.
I just happened to be getting my stress management training while we were having a family reunion here. So I came back and I said, hey, can I just teach you guys like a little 5-minute class that I'm supposed to practice for stress management? And everybody was like, sure, we'll be your guinea pigs. This is all family. They're all being really supportive. Um, and so it was actually my dad's cousin. So my dad's cousin says, I'll participate. He does this little 3-5 minute sequence that I give him, just twist, forward bending, backward bending. He slept that night, came back and was like, that's the first time I've slept through the night since Vietnam. This was in the late 2000s or some mid 2000s. Um, And then he went home and he kept doing it, and he was like, I know that when I do it, I can sleep since. And unfortunately, he passed away, but he it was really powerful that
Yeah.
something that simple could heal
Wow.
something really that had been with him for a really long time. So I don't,
No,
I
you're
don't want to
absolutely right.
discount the simplicity and the power of the simplicity, but it is true. Like, sometimes your need is deeper than a cat cow, but cat cow can be very powerful.
100%. Yeah, because it's like there's not ayahuasca, ibogaine, any of these mushroom places. They all have integrative practices where there is always some sort of like yoga is it's already like fused with these spaces. They have meditations and movement practices, but then also journaling and stuff like that as well if you do go to these types of retreats. But what I was gonna say though is that like the lawyer himself, the reason what got him into it was that he was representing Walmart Walmart or the big companies against workers' comp's claims. And it would be women, your probably your age essentially that worked in Dollar General or wherever all their lives. And they're like, I am full of pain from head to toe. The doctor keeps and then he would have to be the one that would be like, well, your doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you, so we can't give you workers' comp. And basically, and that was what kind of reverted him. That's when he realized he was like, no, it's deeper than that. There's like a deep rooted issue. There's a deep rooted um misbalance that is causing this pain permeating throughout all of these people's bodies. Casey Means, who was kind of like in the spotlight recently, like right before um like around like the RFK kind of thing, kind of movement when it comes to like addressing the healthcare system and all that kind of stuff. But I think she really articulated it beautifully. Is like this, the imperialist system or like the patriarchy or whatever, like this system that we're talking about that's causing all this pain, like it's very destructive to life. It attacks life itself, as in the planet, like especially through construction, bombing places, stuff like that. It's devastating to the construction, the to the environment, the pesticides, the plastics, all these things are degenerative. And then also to women themselves, like, you know, how many, women, like, especially girls my age, like, all the girls I knew were on birth control by like 15, like 16,
Yeah.
like type
Yeah.
things, or like, or like, you view your menstrual as like this huge, like, terrible thing that has to be overcome and medicated for, um, et cetera, et cetera. So, downstream of that, that's what he was seeing, and that's what really like animated him to be like, no. And it was women that really introduced them to the psychedelics, especially in my life or just in general. It's like there's that connection, like, between our relationship to the earth and how we feel internally. And I found that, like, you know, until you adjust your relationship and your belief systems about your role on the planet, how you're impacting the planet, like that that can very well have an impact on your health. I'll put it like in a little bit of a different way, where it's like, hey, if you feel like you are harmful for the planet, why would the planet want you to move around easily? Like, that's another way to look at it. Or like, like, why would I have you be so mobile? Like, I need your back and hips to hurt so you can't be destructive out there. Like, and I'm not saying it's exactly like that, but it does help. I do see a correlation between the most physically demanding jobs are the most destructive to life, either
Mm.
their lives or life itself. And there's just a direct correlation that can't be escaped. And until that's like, I think there could be, holistic construction where you're building beautiful things and you're not degrading the people's bodies, but that has to live under a different infrastructure. So for the for all of us, it's like pain's gonna come. We're built with a system that handles pain. Don't lose faith. Keep your mind centered on that fact. If your mind gets distracted, that's okay. Gently guide your mind back. And this is the same thing with meditation. It's like it's the same thing. There's physical things you can do, like, like Radha was saying. There's wisdom you can learn, like Joe Dispenza and these different folks. But ultimately, pain is a mental phenomenon. Like, you are experiencing pain in the mind, right? You're getting a message from your body that there's pain here. So just pay attention to that messaging. Don't Don't project into the future and make it worse than it is. Don't like don't expand it, but just be like, okay, my rib cage hurts when I expand it past this volume. I have two choices. I could either try to stretch my rib cage a little bit, maybe try to get a little bit more range of motion, then let it rest, or I could just breathe shallower depths. But the pain isn't the problem. The pain is letting me know, hey, if you keep breaching this boundary, you're never gonna heal. Like you're never gonna get back to where you want to be. Or and this is the last thing I'll say. The beautiful thing about injuries, like me, yoga instructor, pull my hamstring, try to drop into like a front split, just like you're saying, just like not really thinking, trying to just do something, pull my hamstring, was pulled for like a year. And this is like already on my less flexible leg. But treating that injury, like now that it's gone, my left leg is way more flexible than it ever was. It's more flexible than my right for the first time in my entire life. So, and like same thing with scabbing or callousing. There's this principle where sometimes where you get injured or harmed, your body gets stronger. It it's not meant to make you weaker, you
It's
know?
also sometimes in the healing process, it can, like, that's what I was talking to my chiropractor about yesterday. I was like, I ignored my body for 3.5 years. I didn't listen to it. I just worked. Did not go to the chiropractor at all, even though I knew I was getting pain in my hip. That was not resolving itself through my yogic practice. And now I'm going to the chiropractor. Well, guess what? Like my body's so used to holding the muscles around that space to try to protect it.
Yeah.
They're kind of mad that now we're trying to put it back in place. So I was telling, the chiropractor, my husband, I was like, I know this is going to be a process. This is not going to be like an overnight fix where all of a sudden it's going to be fine. I ignored it for quite a while. And now the healing process is going to take a while for it to come back into a state of balance. But that's where we are.
It is what it is. You're
And it's
not
better
giving
than the alternative. I mean, at least I have at least I have the ability and the time and the space and the whatever to be able to do this healing at this time. So I'm grateful for that. Just like you, like having the yogic practice, being able to do the tools to stretch out your hamstring again so that it can become even better than it
absolutely.
was before. And
Wow.
that's maybe also what pain and injury is like a little signal to us, like, hey, pay attention. It's a little
Mhm.
area of weakness I need you to pay attention to here. And I was saying, if I do the work now in really strengthening and dealing with the out of balance nature of this hip, then maybe I don't have to have hip surgery or I put it off 10, 15, 20 years, right? So, um, that's the beauty of healing and like doing this stuff, even though it takes a longer time, it's a slower process. Sometimes it can be frustrating how slow the healing process can be. But ultimately, it's worth it because I'd much rather be healed than just keep putting band-aids on something over and over again.
100%. Yeah. Um, well, is there anything else you want to say, like in closing?
I think that's it. Just tune in next week to see how the healing process is going.
All right, dope. I'll say one more thing, like that we didn't say. There's some of us that have people in our lives that have terminal illnesses, or where we know where it's gonna go, and it's you know, you know, when all thing else fails, just pray. I do want to emphasize that. Like we do talk about a lot of tools and a lot of resources, but if that is something that you do and you're in pain, or you know others that are in pain, don't be afraid to take that step. Um, Pray for the pain to be gone. Pray for the suffering to end. Even if like the higher power says no, that's okay. But just understand that, like, just like we're talking about this suffering, even in this life, non-terminal suffering, if you will, like it's not meant to make you weaker. These veterans that come back after the Ibogaine experiences, or these people that are healed after prison or whatever, that have done these things, like they're stronger than ever. They've got like they have a depth to them that's rare. So
And be
you
kind to
can,
yourself about it, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, and be
you are not a
kind.
failure because you're in pain. You're not a
100%.
failure because you didn't heal yourself. You're not a failure because you didn't cure cancer, or you're not a failure because you ain't got the hip surgery, mean, hip surgery is the best thing my mom ever did in her life, and many of my friends. Um, I think it's just a matter of like being kind to yourself and trying to work with your body in some healing way, but certainly also being grateful for those. I think that's true of anything. Like, I'm not against Western medicine. I think it's amazing. And when you need it, you really need it. But there are ways to not get stuck in a cycle of um, illness. There is, and even if your body's ill and it's not going to get better, again, mentally, you can still be well. Or
100%.
if you're mentally unwell, don't be too hard on yourself. Take the medications, put the foundation down, and then still do all the beautiful things that will just improve and add layers of grace and beauty to your life. But mostly be kind to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got.
All right.
Cool.
See you next
Peace.
week.
See you guys.